Hey, what's up, guys? This is Brian from Whisper Status 74, and this video is about the displays in the class of the Vizios, the TCLs, and Hisense as far as being considered bargain brands and if you should purchase them or not. And my answer to it may surprise you a little bit because it has actually changed in the last few years than it has where my thoughts were even as long ago as 2015, 2014. It'll talk about brand loyalty and where your experience with those particular companies, be it Samsung, LG, Sony, some of the major, Panasonic, where your experiences lie in terms of going with that particular manufacturer and where your loyalty lies. And do you make blind purchases based on the brand name over the actual product or the specs? Also, Artings just reviewed the 950G, which is the step-up model to the 900F. They have a very interesting article there. And we'll talk about that display in a separate video when I get a chance to actually look at one. But so far it looks pretty impressive. Has some of the features of the Z9F, but for better or worse in terms of a lower contrast ratio. But anyway, back to what we're talking about with Vizio TCL. A lot of times I get the question, should I purchase a Vizio P series, Vizio M series, a TCL, or a Hisense, or should I buy a Samsung or Sony of the same price? And I feel when you go to a Costco or a BJ's or a Sam's Club, Walmart, Target, that's a little bit hard to discern, simply because they have Vizios and TCL's lower models there as well, be it the D series, the E series. Some of the other, they lack some of the higher end specs. What I think is important is if you're comparing the highest end TCL or the highest end Vizio, you should compare them to the highest end Sony or highest end Samsung. So if you're looking at the flagship P series or the Quantum P series, those TVs are directly relatable to Sony and Samsung's and LG's top of the line. In terms of specs, now you can argue in terms of quality, how their local dimming is, how they make things show up in terms of those specs. But going by what they give for the money really has a lot of value that I think a lot of people overlook. There is a little bit of that prejudice of things being a bargain brand. Vizio was considered a Walmart type brand forever. In the early 2000s, my buddy bought a Vizio Plasma. That's how far back they go. And back then it was considered a bargain brand. And let's be fully honest. I've had my issues with Vizio and had defective panels. I had 3 defective P series. However, I also had, 4 or 5 defective high-end Samsungs, defective Sony, defective LG. So some of these companies might not be well known for their manufacturing practices or their build quality. However, I would argue that even the higher end arguably have the same amount, if not more. Perhaps due to volume and how much they actually put out. I mean, that's debatable. But the more people that I talk to outside of YouTube in the regular world will tell me, without even knowing that I'm interested in it, that they just picked up a Samsung, maybe the lower tier 4K TV, and they absolutely love it, and they grabbed it here, and they spent X. Somebody told me they bought a flagship 6 series QLED, which, as we all know, isn't the flagship, and it doesn't have, nothing's wrong with that display, but it doesn't have the options that the step-up models have, whether it's full array, wide color gamut, some of the things that it's missing. And I think some people walk into these stores and they'll pass by a TCL 6 series and go right to a Samsung. The problem with the Samsung line and the other lines is they're so convoluted in their numbering system, especially at those stores. You're not sure if you're buying a 2017, a 2018, so it can be confusing. But with me personally in 2016, spending an absurd amount of money on flagships, and also getting a little bit snotty with the fact that I had a flagship, whether it was the Z9D, and for a lot of us it's the top of the top of the top. There was a certain arrogance that came with it, and that came with it due to how much I spent, not for what I saw on screen. And that was very humbling because I felt like I couldn't go back down. The 900E for me is a mid-range display, a mid to high, whatever you guys want to call it. I was very reluctant to go back to the 900E because I had come from the KS9800, the 940E. It was definitely a step back. However, I've never been happier with a display as I am with a display that's in front of me. So what I'm trying to say is that for those of you that ask me in the comments, would I look at a TCL, would I look at a Vizio P series or a Quantum P series? Absolutely. And where I have to be careful wording this, I rather see you aim at the highest end mid-range in terms of the company than the lowest end high range. Meaning going for the lowest Samsung or the lowest Sony or the lowest LG because of the name, when you can get for the same price the flagship Vizio or the flagship TCL or the Hisense, which I'm probably pronouncing wrong, by the way. But the reason why I say that is in specs. If you look at what the Vizios or TCLs offer, just in terms of HDR, in terms of color gamut, in terms of Dolby Vision, full array local dimming, their peak brightness. Now, I know the TCL is only 60 hertz. Hopefully they'll change that with the next one. But unless you're going to play at a higher frame rate in terms of video games, that shouldn't really bother you much in terms of how film translates or even gaming translates. But there's plenty of people out there that have these displays that have an actual better picture, just a lesser name, if that makes sense, in terms of how Vizio and TCL are still looked at. Now, my prediction for both those companies is they're poised to be huge in 2019, not only in their price, but in terms of their actual quality. I didn't love the Vizio in 2016. I thought the picture, though it had the specs, was a little bit dull. But it did definitely improve in the next few years, as well as the TCL. I'm pretty impressed with the way they look. What's more impressive, guys, is the bang for your buck. If you spend $600 or $700 on a pretty large 4K display, you're going to be able to buy another one in 2 or 3 years if you want to get an 8K display or one with better settings or, HDMI 2.1. But I'll tell you, spending $7,000 or $8,000 as I did on a flagship display, going to be really hard to justify buying another one in a few years. Whether it was plasma back in the day or the Z9D or, it's very hard in technology. It ages very, very quickly. And then we tend to have the best of the best for a few minutes. And then all of a sudden it's barely comparable to the lowest end of next year. Now, am I saying that that's something that works every single time? I don't say that, but I look at cars a lot of times and you'll see where Honda and Nissan, Maximas were forever the best. And all of a sudden Kia and Hyundai, sneak in with this Audi body style and this technology. And it got them sleeping at the wheel as far as the design or the styling of those cars. All of a sudden these other cars from lesser brands or brands that we deem being bargain brands all of a sudden look like Audis as they drive by. Now, that might be a poor analogy depending if you're a car person or not, but sometimes I'm very surprised by the quality and the price that goes with it. So my point is just keeping an open mind with these other brands, be it TCL, Hisense, and Vizio. Some of the other brands out there, Philips, and some of the bargain brands I still would stay away from just because they don't offer the specs. I'm not saying give these brands a chance because they are priced fairly. I'm saying that they're priced fairly with the highest end specs. When you're comparing the Quantum P series to a Z9D and a Q9FN, even if it's not quite as good in terms of its refinement, its specs are similar, but its price is less than double. I mean, it's ridiculous. So you might be able to justify a little color gradation on the screen if you only pay $2,000 for it. So for me, I'm definitely going to have an open mind. I might be looking at the Vizio Quantum in 2019 at 75 inches. I'm just saying that when you're shopping, keep them in mind. Aim for the lower end brand with the higher end specs and see where you find. Don't just blindly go with the Samsungs and the Sonys and the LGs. Keep an open mind with Vizio, TCL, and Hisense, and you'll be surprised at how good the picture quality is and how much more you get for your money. All right, guys, thank you as always. This is Brian from Whisper Status 74. I'll talk to you soon.